was preaching and presiding at the Eucharist at St. Mary's in Promise last Sunday afternoon. There was a teenager at that service. She was a high school senior. She was living with her grandparents. I asked her what she wanted to do after high school, and she told me that she hoped to go to college in Minnesota and major in social work. So I said, "Oh, have you ever thought about going to seminary?" And I have to tell you, her eyes got really big. And her face looked all kind of surprised. And she answered me. And she said, "No." And so I said to her, "I want you to think about it. I really want you to think about it. God's obviously given you a gift of wanting to do social work. You have a passionate heart. You want to change people's lives for the better. So consider, please consider, whether God might be calling you through your Christian faith to use your compassion and your gifts as a major part of your ministry as an Episcopal priest or deacon." To her credit, this young lady did not jump into her grandfather's truck and drive away. She stuck around. She stayed for the service. And she may well grow up to be one of the finest social workers of all time. She also may grow up to be one of the finest priests or deacons that the Episcopal Diocese of South Dakota has ever had. Time will tell. And if I have the blessing of ordaining her in 7 years, I'm going to give her a signed copy of this convention speech. My point is simply this. People won't know that they are gifted. People won't know that they have gifts that can be used as blessings to others. Some people won't even know that they themselves are blessed. Unless and until we as the church help them. Unless we as the church raise them up to live into the blessing that they are. Throughout the Episcopal Diocese of South Dakota, Jesus is calling us out as being blessed. And being a missionary diocese, say those words with me now.
Being a missionary diocese.
Being a missionary diocese at heart, we need to live into that calling. That calling of being a blessed people. And we need to begin to make this calling of ours a shared reality. When I presented myself as the bishop candidate, I shared with you that there are 5 areas of our life and ministry that I'm inviting us all to live into together as God's blessed people in the Episcopal Diocese of South Dakota. Focusing on these 5 areas, I believe, will help us become not only a bigger blessing to one another, it will also help us to become a bigger blessing and a much more powerful blessing in the lives of those we touch with the Holy Spirit's help. I used to call these 5 areas the 5 umbrellas, but that was before I was introduced to star quilts. I love seeing people being wrapped up in and enveloped by a star quilt. That's being draped over them as they're being surrounded by it. I did the same thing for a dear friend of our family, Ruth Schumacher, who lived in Connecticut and whose funeral was 2 weeks ago. When I returned from Niobrara Convocation, I brought back a star quilt that I had won at Niobrara Convocation. It had been made by St. Elizabeth's up in Standing Rock, and I wrapped that quilt around her shoulders just as I had seen done by others. And Ruth's facial expression was one of joy. It was one of love, and it was one of deep, deep blessing. And thus I now refer to these 5 areas as being the 5 star quilts of South Dakota. And I introduce them, and as we begin to live into them, I invite you to see yourself being wrapped up inside each of them. And my prayer and my hope is that your life will radiate with the same kind of joy as together we grow and make improvements and adjustments in each of these 5 areas. These 5 star quilts are relations, communication, formation, transformation, and advocacy. Those 5 star quilts are listed, I believe, in order of greatest importance. And that is why you hear relations being listed as number 1. Our relationships with one another through Jesus Christ, they are the most valuable thing that we have. Without relationships, we are just individual silos. Individual silos of faith scattered across our diocese with no connection. When that happens, people begin to feel as if they are all alone in this diocese of ours, especially if they are serving and worshiping in far out places. People begin to think that no one cares, or that no one even knows that they exist. And yet, on the flip side, ironically, when opportunities come around to share fellowship and to take counsel together at different events and to build relationships, too often I hear the words, "I'm not going to go. I'm too busy. It's too far. I'm too needed where I am. I cannot come." And so yet another opportunity becomes missed. So when you hear me speaking about how we're going to work on our relationships, know that I'm speaking across the whole spectrum of our relationships. I am speaking about all of our connections with each other, connections that go both ways, not just one. I'm speaking about my relationship with our clergy and their relationships with me. I'm speaking about my relationships with our congregations and about their relationship with me. I'm speaking about the relationships that are enjoyed amongst our clergy and the relationships that exist and that can exist between 2 or more congregations. And I'm also talking about your congregation's relationship with the diocese as a greater whole. Not just in Peter, as the greater whole. As I said, our relationships are the very best thing that you and I can invest our energy in. And why? Because none of us can be the church all on our own. I was taught that in the very early days of my being in South Dakota, when Dr. David O'Hara pulled me aside and told me that one of the reasons that we saw so much courtesy and hospitality in South Dakota is because back in the early days of South Dakota, people's livelihood and sometimes their very life depended upon the relationships that they had with their neighbors. You could not afford to be on the outs with your neighbor over silly little stuff. Relationships with your neighbor are life-giving. They are a blessing. And together, our relationships help us to become an even greater blessing. So that being said, there are 2 things that I'm going to be inviting us to focus on during this next year as far as our relationships with each other are concerned. And the first one is this. If you are not already doing so, I would like to invite your congregation to consider entering into a partnership relationship with another congregation in our diocese for a 1-year period of time. That congregation may be within your own town, within your own city, it may be within your own deanery, it may be on the far side of the diocese. inviting each of you to reach out and to connect with another congregation here in South Dakota, in the diocese. Learn about each other's strengths, your joys, your challenges. Learn how both of you are living out the Christian faith. Learn about how you can support each other through your prayers, as well as through your gifts and talents. I am inviting you to explore having a partnership relationship, and then let us know who you have partnered with. For it is my hope that at our next Diocesan Convention, we can have ourselves some old-fashioned testifying and have some people who will come and who will serve as witnesses as to how their partnership has helped them to become a stronger blessing of Jesus Christ. That's the first thing. The second thing that I'm going to ask to happen is that when there is a clergy conference or a clergy retreat, unless there is a really, really good reason or an absolute dire emergency, I want our clergy to be there. And I want them to be there so that they can be with each other and visit with each other and pray with each other and support each other. Some of our clergy live in very remote parts of our state. Some of our clergy are serving multiple churches without much support. And so when opportunities arise for clergy to come together, I need them to be there. And I need our congregations to make sure that they are able to come and that they are given and provided the means to come. Because when they return to, when they come back to do the day in and the day out ministry that they have accepted the call to do, they will come back to you recharged and renewed. They will come back to you knowing that they are not working alone in this diocese that we live in. So when a clergy person tells you that they are going away to be at an event with other clergy, you give them your blessing. Support them. Reschedule whatever may need to be rescheduled. And make sure that they take full advantage of being able to check in with their bishop and with their fellow sister, brother, sibling clergy. The next area or startwell that I want to address is communications. You obviously can't have a relationship unless you are somehow communicating. And thus I would like us as a diocese to start looking creatively at the ways that we are communicating with one another. There are parts of our diocese that do not have very easy access to internet capability. Some of our members have to travel to get online. One of the members whom I'm familiar with, if she wants to get online, she has to drive to the Dairy Queen. There are times I would like to have that situation. That's the reality that we have here in South Dakota. And so we need to discover ways to ensure that our communications reach those who need them and in a timely fashion. Because if you cannot be informed, you cannot act. Or worse, if you are not informed like everyone else is being informed, it goes right back to that feeling of being out of the loop. And so for my part, and speaking for our diocesan staff, we will be addressing this issue from a diocesan standpoint. And we will be coming up with a system that will ensure, to the very best of our ability, that information gets to where it needs to get to successfully. On another note, I've had people in parishes tell me that they have no idea what is happening on our reservations. And that's where most of our congregations are located. At the same time, and this was just a couple of weeks ago, I had a person from one of our reservations tell me that she has no idea what is happening in our parishes. So, communicating with each other will also be one of the areas that will be addressed in the coming year. And the last question that I would raise when it comes to communications has to do with how we are communicating with those who are living in our communities. If your parish has a website, how up to date is it? Go home and check that out. If your church has an answering machine, is the message on your answering machine listing all of your services? And I'm laughing because I've called some of you. Is the message on your answering machine listing any of your service times? Check that out when you go home. Because I guarantee you, as I was making up the bishop's visitation schedule and I was calling different churches to try and say, okay, what time is it? I had no idea. How are congregations getting the word out in their communities about who they are? How are we getting the word out in our communities about what you all do? As some of you heard me say during the walkabouts, the days of us sitting in church and waiting for people to discover us all on their own, they've gone and left. Those days have been long gone, in fact, for over 50 years, if not more. So how are we communicating information about who we are and about what we do with the people who live in our communities? So I am inviting you to return home and talk with your clergy, your leaders, and with your congregation about what your communication needs and about your communication methods. This will be one of the areas of conversation that I will look forward to having with you during a visitation. And if you are a congregation that publishes a newsletter, either by paper or online, I would be most grateful if you would add me to your list. At this point, out of 78 congregations, I believe that I'm hearing from 3. And I would like to see that number go up. The third quilt is the area of formation. How are we forming our people on both a diocesan level and on a congregational level? Thunderhead Episcopal Center is a wonderful jewel in our diocese. It has a long history, and it has much potential. And I am grateful to those who care about it, and those who will be willing to explore how it can be used in the future, year-round. How it can be used as a place where God's people of all ages can come and be formed. How are we forming our seminarians and the people whom we are preparing for ordained ministry? That conversation has begun already, and a hold has been placed upon new people coming into the process until our process can be easily defined and best suit the purposes for ministry here in South Dakota. As I said before, we are a missionary diocese at heart. And thus, those whom we will help to form for ordained ministry will be trained to be missionaries. They will be trained to serve missions on reservations and parishes alike. They will be fearless, energetic visionaries with a heart for God's people, because that's what we need. I am very excited about this formational kind of conversation, and I am particularly excited about the fact that our diocese has garnered attention from seminaries in the Episcopal Church to help train and to help form seminarians from all other dioceses. That's impressive. That's impressive. Formation will also be a topic of conversation during Episcopal visitations, for I am genuinely curious about what your congregations are doing to help form your people. And if you need help in finding resources or ideas, let's raise those questions up. If you haven't thought about raising up a catechist in your church to help form your people, let's talk about that as well. People are hungry for learning. And in many of our congregations, especially those in the reservations, this kind of formation is going to have to be done, and done well, by the members of our laity. The fourth quilt is transformation. As Christian people, as a blessed people, as people of a missionary diocese, we have been called to go forth into God's world and to be God's agents of change. We have been called to be God's agents of transformation. We are people, as I said last night, of hope, with some of us living in areas which on the surface can seem to be pretty devoid of hope because of the number of challenges facing them. Last June, when I was at that College for Bishops gathering, we had a little workshop on how to interact with those who are in the media. And we took turns being interviewed by the leader who acted like a reporter. And when it came to be my turn, the leader asked me to describe the challenges that we were facing in the Diocese of South Dakota. And so I told him, we have a high unemployment rate, we have a high alcoholism rate, we have a high suicide rate, we have people who are living in third world conditions right here in the United States, we have racism. I have been told that the ratio of young Native American males being shot by police compared to the ratio of young African American males being shot by police is 4-to-1. We have false narratives being told by the government insofar as how much quote-unquote help Native Americans receive. We have priests serving a multiple number of congregations on their own. We have congregations that cannot be reached during certain parts of the year, etc., etc., etc. To be honest with you, I thought that I handled that reporter pretty darn well. My colleagues, on the other hand, the other bishops who were in the room, afterwards they looked at me and they asked, "Where's the hope? Where's the hope? What is your diocese doing about all these situations?" And I looked back at him, I started to get defensive. I said, wait. I was not asked about hope. I was asked about challenges. And they said to me words that I will never forget. Words that I will always, as a bishop, remember when talking to other people about the Episcopal Diocese of South Dakota. These bishops looked at me and they said, no one is ever going to ask you about hope. No one is ever going to ask you about what your diocese is doing to make a difference in the lives of other people. Our country right now thrives on disaster. When was the latest hurricane? When was the last tornado? When did the latest flood occur and how many people died in it? When was the last mass shooting? When was the latest scandal? Tell us all about the latest conflict. Those kinds of stories sell. Those kinds of stories sell. Those are the kinds of stories that our nation hears about, and they feed off of them. Rarely do we hear what's being done in response to those situations. We rarely, if ever, hear about how people are trying to make a difference, and you know why. Because 2 or 3 days after a conflict is over, we become focused on a brand new disaster. And the previous disaster, the previous situation, and the lives of the people who were affected just 48 to 72 hours ago, they become forgotten. They become forgotten. My brother and sister bishops taught me a very important lesson that day. They taught me that I've got to be the one who brings hope into the story. We've got to be the ones who bring hope into the stories of South Dakota. Quick case in point. There was a young woman who went missing, and later she was found to be hanged. Her family believes that she was murdered on the Rosebud Reservation. Did the reservation police go looking for this woman when she was reported missing? Nope. Did the FBI go looking for her? Nope. Do you know who went looking for her? We did. We did. The church did. Mother Lauren Stanley, who is the supervising presbyter of the Rosebud Mission West, she got her people moving. She worked with the victim's family. She organized them. She instructed them. She fed them. She energized them. She even involved the 2 seminarians who were in her charge last summer. And that group of people, they were the ones who found that young woman. And Mother Lauren helped her community to bury that young woman. And in response, all those officials who initially had refused to help or to give any assistance whatsoever to the search, they repented. They repented. And they said publicly, never again. Never again. That is a transformative story of hope. That is what being a transformative agent in God's kingdom looks like. Even when a part of God's kingdom is confronted by many, many challenges, we cannot allow ourselves to become convinced that we are powerless. We cannot allow ourselves to become convinced that there is nothing that we can do. We are a blessed people. We are a missionary diocese. And as a missionary diocese, we can bring God's hope where God's hope is needed. We can bring justice where justice is required. And we can bring love. We can bring God's love. And we can apply that love to hearts that are hurting and make a difference that counts and that matters and that lasts. And that leads me to the 5th and final quilt, the quilt of advocacy. We are blessed by other people in the wider Episcopal Church, as well as by people who are not involved in the Episcopal Church at all, people who want to come to South Dakota and be with us, and do things for us and for our people. We are the harvest that the Holy Spirit has called them to explore, to go and to work in. That's fine. That's fine. We welcome them, and we want them to come. It initially does not matter to me that some of these folks may be coming to us only because they're curious, or only because they're sympathetic. What does matter to me is that they come. I want them to come and spend time with us. Because in addition to doing whatever it is that they are feeling led by the Holy Spirit to do, I want to insist that they take time out of their trip and listen to us, and be taught by us, and to be gifted by us, and be transformed through the Holy Spirit's power by us. Because these people who are coming to our diocese on mission trips, friends, these people are part of the harvest that you and I are being called to go into. Many of these people who are coming to us, I believe, are coming to South Dakota with the intention of giving and transforming, and thanks be to God that they are. Partnerships and working relationships that are grounded in Jesus' work, they are to be welcomed and celebrated. However, as I said earlier, a relationship goes both ways. And I don't want any mission team thinking that they are only here to give and not to receive. I don't want any mission team coming into South Dakota believing that they and they alone possess the transforming power of God's Holy Spirit. They already have made the decision to come and to be with us and to work amongst us, and so I want us to deeply engage them and invite them to sit with us and to listen to our stories and learn from our elders. I want these people to return home knowing what God is up to in our diocese, and how we have come to know God, and how we have come to love God. For in doing so, we will be transforming them, and we will be giving them a far, far better gift to take home and use than they will ever get at Waldorf. Our work is cut out for us. It's a large agenda. There's a lot of work to be done. And at the same time, I believe that we're up to the task. Because we're God's blessed people. And God is already at work preparing us, I firmly believe, for some very, very good things ahead. Thank you again for inviting me to join you in this newest chapter of our history. May God bless our efforts. May God bless our diocese. And may God bless each and every one of you.